For those that are attending, thank you for joining us. We're hoping that this becomes a series that we're able to put together. This first one is going to be unique in that it is a bit longer, and it's kind of just showcasing what Swatchbook is all about. But moving forward, this actual Spotlight series will be focused on our suppliers, on this material suppliers that we have inside of Swatchbook. The idea was to find a way to share. The suppliers obviously have access to Swatchbook and can share the materials on Swatchbook, but they also wanted a platform that they can have where they can speak about their materials and showcase them before providing the links for people. Very similar to trying to go to a material show or coming on site, which obviously right now, both of which have either been postponed or canceled, and it's kind of putting a wrench in everybody's seasonal work. So hopefully this will be kind of a place where they can come in, share their materials, and then have a conversation offline with their customers and potential customers from all the different brands that are on Swatchbook or looking at Swatchbook, or even coming in from existing customers for themselves. And that's what this is all about. We will showcase other things in there as we gauge community feedback as well. Many times we have had questions about, what's a good workflow? How do you do something like this in 3D or 2D? What about automation? What can we automate in a process? What's a good material digitization process? What are some options available? I think those are a lot of great pieces of information that we've gathered during our careers. And we'd love to share with that. We'd love to share that with people on the Spotlight series, and to kind of make sure that we're providing as much helpful feedback into how to best digitize your workflow as possible. Sometimes it's just organizing a material library. It doesn't even have to be all 3D or digital. All right. Well, it's 10:01. I'm gonna get started. I know people will be trickling in, so we'll let them come in as they need to, but we can get started talking about Swatchbook. Like I said, this will be recorded and shared back on our YouTube channel for everybody else to kind of share around and kind of be able to kind of reference back to it. And my voice is coming in well, Thomas, screen as well. Everything's good to go.
Everything is good to go.
Do you see my participants page on the right-hand side? Is it blocking your view, or is it just simply the Swatchbook stuff?
No, I don't. Nothing blocked. Nothing
Awesome.
is blocked.
Very cool.
Everything's cool.
Very cool. All right. So I guess we'll get started. So Swatchbook, the best way to really describe what we are, obviously our slogan is the new home of materials, because we feel this is kind of the future of materials. But if you make products, you need materials. If you need materials, we want you to come to Swatchbook. That is basically the vision that we have for Swatchbook since day one. And while we are currently focused on the fashion/home goods world, we do anticipate getting other types of materials in there. But obviously there's a lot to solve even within just the space that we're in today. Swatchbook at its heart is a material sourcing and management cloud platform. So it's a SaaS-based model. We've built it in a way that gives you a tailored user experience based on the device that you're using, based on your user type. What are you exactly there for? Are you a sourcing person? Are you a designer? Are you a developer? Each one of those personas user experience differs, and it depends on what device you're using. But we built it in a way where it is a visual user experience that is engaging, that looks at materials in a way where they were supposed to look at. And we'll talk about how has that been transformed for us. So we'll start with, what are we trying to solve? So there's a lot of challenges in these industries that we mentioned. The ones that we focused on was the slow and manual process of development, whether it's the material creation or the product creation or both. A disconnected supply chain. A lot of times there is no connection between the suppliers and the brands. because the brands are sitting, working with PLM, PDM systems, and the suppliers are not, and nothing is really connected, which is really a shame because we're living in a digital world. That type of data connection should exist. And just going with unforeseen disruptions. Not having digital in somebody's workflow has really hindered a lot of the brands that we talk to. Today, it's the coronavirus obviously affecting the world. But before it was tariffs, before there was, there's always something where digital can really help in. And unfortunately, not all the brands are up there. And we feel very strongly that they do need to get to that point where things are digital. They have that as a part of their process natively. And those are the things that we were looking at with Swatchbook. And we looked at the current process today, and maybe we should say yesterday, because a lot of brands have moved on that have joined with Swatchbook. But it used to be where you'd send a spreadsheet. Sometimes there's thumbnails, sometimes there's no thumbnails. Sometimes the thumbnails are inconsistent, but it's mostly text data. And it's a very manual process where you talk to your supplier, they send you the spreadsheet, you start talking about which cell you're talking about, what about this information, what colors can this come in. There's a slow process of the sending of the physical samples, and okay, well, I like it, can you send me more so I can make a product out of it, and then I'll ship that back out to my factory, they'll make the samples, ship that back. I mean, it takes weeks, if not months sometimes, to just see a product with those materials. And we felt that that is really not a very good way to work, and certainly can be improved upon using our existing system. So we focused on how do we get faster to market using digital material development, using visualization and virtual solutions, material validation that starts at the supplier and it feeds into the design process. And then putting that, that type of data set into the hands of brands and suppliers to give them data, real-time data insight, what materials do people like, what materials and colors are people using, and then provide that so that suppliers can have a better understanding of how that works, which obviously right now they're not really doing that. Everything is very analog. And then finally, the 3D e-commerce side of things, where your assets can go all the way from design to your consumer via interactive product or photorealistic renders. The idea is that this is the future. It's probably never been as important as today. We literally get off multiple calls a day where brands are rethinking, how do they deal with this shutdown? How do they get to their consumers? If the consumers are even going to buy them, right? It's tough challenges, and what we want to provide is a solution that gets them where they need to get faster, better quality, and a more cohesive and sustainable manner. And I think when we hear sustainability in materials, we only think of materials, what the composition of the material is or how it was manufactured. But the reality of it is there's also a lot of sustainability in this itself. A lot of people's times are wasted, redoing things or waiting for things, and that's obviously not sustainable. We want to showcase to you, how Swatchbook works, and this is how library exploration starts. Again, we focused on the visual aspect of things, where you go from left to right, material rolls to one-to-one, to drapes, to full 3D. The idea is to provide as much visual, engaging content that we can to make the decision process for design much, much better. Now, the one thing we will say, we don't replace touch and feel, but we do augment the experience before as well as after you get the materials in your hands. And the library navigation itself is pretty straightforward. You search for things like, you do your results, you give those results in collections, you can download them, you can utilize them. We have a whole set and systems that allow you to navigate through this and customize the user experience per brand. So one of the unique features is that you're not just managing materials coming in from suppliers, you're also managing your own materials, and you can upload your own materials as a brand and create variations of that and then share that internally with your team, or going back to your supplier and say, hey, we were working on some material ideas, can we get started with this? The fact that you can combine both into one is really a great feature to have within the Swatchbook platform. So with material exploration, if you're looking at the specific individual material, the idea is that you'll get that thumbnail, but you get so much more. You get 3D assets, you get 2D renders, you get a lot of visual data you can make decisions on, right? So I can actually load up a 3D model, and we have a generic library of over 150 assets that can span a lot of generic, from footwear, apparel, accessories, where you can see what that material is going to look like once you put it on a product, the scale, the shininess aspect. We also showcase videos. These videos are great because, as I said, we don't replace touch and feel, but the moment you put it in somebody else's hand and you show that in a video form, it's really become such a popular aspect of our tool. In addition to still having all the metadata. So what's your composition? What's your MOQ? What's your pricing? Or if it's pricing upon request, if the supplier wants it that way. So we provide a lot of information, as well as all the different, obviously, colors that this comes in, and then they can also put in, what thicknesses it comes in, what backings, what dimensions, all of that jazz. When you're inputting data, I want to showcase kind of the opposite side. We have an extensive library of information, and you don't typically type it in. It's all kind of drop-down type systems where you can put in that data. It minimizes user error. You can see it's pretty extensive, and we go through this with every supplier and brand to make sure we're covering what their needs are. At worst case scenario, they can actually add their own, but once they've input that data, we basically showcase only the filled in data. We don't showcase these empty slots in there. But it's as simple as that. You put in the pricing, you expose the pricing, or you put it upon request, you dictate what visibility you have. So as a supplier or as a brand, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to showcase the material, what information to expose, what information not to expose, whether I want to share this privately, whether I want to put this on the marketplace. It's a lot of back-end systems that we've utilized for this. And beyond materials, obviously a lot of the brands that are on there, they have other needs as well. So whether it's laces or straps or webbings or eyelets or hooks or zippers, these are all things that we support natively, not just as a, hey, here's a picture of the product. They can actually upload the 3D file. If you look at other industries, if you're talking about architecture or aerospace, nobody's modeling nuts and bolts. Those are things that the supplier provides to the exact spec, and you just use them as is. And that's no different inside of Swatchbook. Now, what's different is that we give you the flexibility to change, scales and things of graphic presentations, which ultimately is great, and that's something that the supplier can provide. But the 3D aspect, these are actual assets you can download. You can use them within your favorite 3D applications, but it also gives you a better sense of what that thing is going to look like. We showcase it not just in 3D, but also in augmented reality. So that means you can actually see the scale of it right in front of you. If you wanted to literally place that zipper on a product, you can. And that's the type of user experience that we have built at Swatchbook. So that kind of gives you a sense of the trim and hardware. And obviously there's more to it than just that, toe boxes and others. And we work directly with the brands to make sure that we're presenting the materials the way the brand expects from their specific supplier. So we'll sit down with a supplier, look at their data, and provide them the best way to showcase that to the client's spec. So we go to the brands, hey, what do you expect to see from this supplier? And then we go back to the supplier and say, hey, here's the digitization effort that we have to go into. Also, just creating color branches, what we call them color branches, because you grab an existing material and you might have a bunch of variations in color. And that could be multicolored materials. So as the one you see here, it's a simple black and a color. And that's something we can provide at scan time so that we don't have to scan it over and over. We can just change the color on the go, and it could be multiple colors, it doesn't have to be just two. But you can see that basically now as a color variation on that material. Creating color branches is pretty straightforward. So even as a brand, you're able to actually grab your color library file from Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. You can do a color picker. You can grab existing colors from the library itself that you've uploaded and organized. So I can say, oh, this is the one I've been using. I'm going to grab that one or grab a different one and create these color branches. And what that does is actually, for solid colors at least, it grabs that and it multiplies that with the material, maintaining all the metadata of the material and providing them in a platitude of different colors. So you can see them not just in the thumbnails that we just showcased, but also see them on the 3D assets. So I can go and see, well, let me see what this looks like in digital form. Now, obviously, these are all displayed in RGB, but you can save other information in there, such as dye information or your values for Pantone, or if you have a specific unique name in there, you can actually save that within the color asset. That means that when I go back to manufacturing, I have the information that I need, because obviously color on a display versus color on a product are two different things with different consequences. And it doesn't work just for footwear. Obviously, it works for any type of material. So even if you have lace with transparency, it does work there as well, where I can see what that material with the color is going to look like in those different shades. And it's great because I at least get a sense of what could this material look like, what kind of colors are we looking at from a seasonal palette perspective. You can see them again, we render them out in 2D, but we also show them in 3D. It doesn't have to also be solid colors. We can do graphic representations on the materials themselves. And I can also adjust the scales on that on the fly. So I can see what does that look like after it's done on, again, a variety of different apparel, footwear products. Now, the one thing that we always get is, well, can I put my own products in there? And the answer is yes, you can. You can actually put in your own product in 3D. And then that way you have a user experience that's unique to you as a brand, even as a supplier if you wanted to. But we try to provide as much of a generic library as possible. But the nice thing is that if a supplier shared a material on the marketplace, then brand A can actually see it on their own product, and brand B can see it on their own product. And the supplier doesn't actually see any of those products. They're isolated from your own content. And you can see them basically on your content or the generic content. And we organize everything in what we call collections. And obviously it's a, Swatchbook focuses on materials, but we also realize that with materials, a lot of times, you could add trim and hardware, and you could add colors and graphics. So our collections can actually be raw material collections like the one you see at the top right, or they can be a combination of materials, colors, graphics, 3D, 2D assets. We'll organize anything from a digital set, even if we don't even know what the file type is. So we try to also be cognizant of what are the files that people are using, to make sure that we support them. But even if we don't, even if it's an unknown file type, we'll still do it. So it does kind of have some digital asset management capabilities in there as well as part of the offering. Now, in focusing on these brands and their suppliers, in the last year, we've digitized over 10,000 materials. And this is, as far as we know, the largest and highest quality material library in the world, meaning that this is not just digital materials. These are digital materials that you can source directly from the suppliers, which is kind of what makes this unique. That means every material I can put in my virtual world is something I can go and actually obtain from the supplier itself. And we've been growing pretty quickly, and we're going to see an exponential growth right now, again, because a lot of suppliers can't visit their clients and they're trying to find solutions to this. And obviously Swatchbook fits right there for them. And we've been digitizing this with a specific team that we've built in China. And Swatchbook China, it's led by Jackie Yang, our managing director for operations over there. They've been just such a great partner to deal with, because having somebody that understands what you need, having somebody that's building a great team around them that is able to hold hands for the brands, for the suppliers, and make sure that their digitization journey is smooth. It's already a difficult thing to do any kind of change or transition. So we're there to really assist with that directly. And they were just amazing in putting together a package for our suppliers, especially in this time right now, investing into the scanning aspect of it, making it more affordable to supply. I mean, we were pushing pricing to go down as much as we can, and we took it another step further that gave them the ability, and we'll talk a bit more about this, but now every supplier that gets on board of Swatchbook gets 200 materials scanned and digitized, and we'll talk about that process in a second, as a part of their subscription. This is unheard of. There's nothing like this in the world, and especially not given what we're able to digitize on our side. And I did want to I know this is probably a bit more technical for some of you, but that understanding that process we feel is crucial to knowing what actually entails when you say digitization. And it starts off because the 200 that we provide, obviously what we call something called basic materials. So basic materials are materials that don't have any iridescent or pearlescent or color shifting attributes to it. Those are called basic materials. There are ones that are advanced materials, and some can be scanned, some can't, some need some more manual tools. We do try to, again, help in distinguishing this before we even get the suppliers on board. We'll sit down, look at their materials, and give them an estimate of what's actually needed. But those basic and advanced materials are things that we can digitize. Then we have physics properties, and physics properties are things that you would use in simulation engines if you're doing apparel. So if you're doing clo or browseware with vStitcher, that's what that entails. So our service center can actually do that as well. There's 2D digitization, there's 3D digitization, there's the data and the information that comes from the supplier. And to us, this is what a digital swatch is. And kind of to walk you through this visually, for basic materials, typically we have an in-house Visu scanner that's able to output the different maps that you need, as well as the U3M file. Now, this is great, again, for a majority of materials, but not all the materials. Sometimes we have some really amazing materials that can't be captured using an XText, which is fine. I think people, they always think, do I need this? Well, it just depends what materials you have and what your needs are. It also depends on, graphic representation and repeats. How big is that? The XText have a specific range of sizes they can take. But then if it's a material that's a bit more advanced, that needs really the attributes of the materials, and we do have clients that request, I need this material to be, everything needs to be going through a different thing than the Visu. There's the X-Rite TAC 7. This provides another level of sophistication for the materials, where you're able to capture not just the scans, but you're also able to go one more level, which is the material attributes themselves. So typically in your visualization space, you actually have to grab these scans and put them into different channels and just kind of tweak them to make it look good. Whereas the AXF should be a plug and play if that rendering engine supports it. Now, if it doesn't, you can still extract the files and the maps out of the AXF as well. But this is kind of our step one of digitization. So we have access to the TAC 7. We provide the XText as well. And then if you move on to the simulation side of things, we have both the clo fabric kit as well as the fabric analyzer by Browseware or / by Visu now. That outputs the ZFab file for clo or the U3M file for vStitcher respectively. But this looks at the materials and says, well, let me see how stretchy it is or how bendy, and what's the weight, and all of that's basically calculated and saved into a preset, so that when you apply it in your 3D simulation software for apparel, mostly, you actually get a better representation of the material itself. And then we move on to the 2D digitization, and that basically we are shooting a video, a short 10-second, 15-second video of somebody holding and handling the material. We also show a traditional photo of the material just to make sure, again, we're capturing as much of that as possible. While 3D is always great, sometimes there are certain attributes that a photo actually captures really well. So again, we just want to maximize the amount of visual data that a user has to make sure that their user experience is as good as possible. And then there is the kind of digital 3D aspect, where we actually render it out in 3 different versions: the drape, what we call 1-to-1, and then the roll. And then we also showcase it in 3D, in AR, and we're able to multiply the different color branches in the system as well. And then finally, the data itself. We have what we call the normal tags, but we also have something called smart tags that are associated to 3D assets. And then you have the metadata that gets filled in, which is composition, lead times, order quantities, treatments, finishes, things of that nature. That's, again, all of that gets uploaded to the account, whether it's a supplier or a brand, and that is to us what a digital swatch looks like. And that's the future of how and obviously as technology gets better and more elements are able to extract, we're able to host that data in there, even at the yarn level. And that's something that we can offer right now. So we want to go over some key features that we have inside of Swatchbook. It's not just about, the scans are great, but sometimes, we also look at what is the user experience. So we have something called capture to manufacture, where I might be at a material show, or somebody might bring in a material that hasn't been digitized. And, we have to sometimes just work with what we have. And so this to us is the napkin sketch of designing a material. I see a material I like, I use the capture to manufacture element inside of Swatchbook. This gives you the ability to take a quick picture of the material. So, you know, your phone's handy, you've got it right there. Why not take advantage of it and see if I can actually communicate this visual stuff more? And we do have very easy, you know, cropping tools. We also have an AR aspect to this where it's able to extract the scale and auto adjust the shot, which you saw earlier. But once I do that, it gives me the scale I'm looking at. It also gives me the smart tags that we mentioned earlier. These smart tags are simple tags where I say, oh, it's footwear, it's a slip-on, it's apparel, it's a casual shirt, it's an accessory, it's a handbag. Just having those tags in there, and this is also a customizable user experience per brand beyond what we offer as a generic default. It gives you the ability to put a 3D asset right there at your fingertips without having to even know 3D or model in 3D. Once you have that set up, we will basically project that material directly on the asset, which you can see here. Now, the nice thing about this is because it's a fluid development sandbox, you're able to actually go in there and say, you know what, I'm not sure about the scale. I'd like to change the scale. And obviously, this is a conversation that happens all too often with suppliers, where you see something you like and you say, hey, I'd love to see what this looks like in a different scale, a different lighting. And instead of having to wait for the physical sample to be sent over and then a physical sample of the product to be made, you can simply, at a push of a button, a tap of the screen, see what that material looks like on a augmented reality model right there. Say, I love it. I just need it to be 25% of the scale of the original. Here's why. Here's what the product would look like. When we do that, it minimizes the amount of back and forth from weeks to almost instantly. Another aspect that we introduced last year is our visual search, where sometimes you find a material and you're kind of like, I don't know how to describe this. Is this a zebra print tiger, you know, using red, blue with polka dot whites? Well, instead of doing that, you take a picture of it, and then we find results within our system that looks at that. So you're able to actually use visual search with machine learning to extract materials that might look similar instead of developing brand new ones, or maybe you want something that looks similar to this but doesn't necessarily have to match it. You can do that as well. This system is constantly learning, and we provide a feedback system where you're able to actually go and vote up and down the results to make sure that the results that are coming in are better and better over time. Obviously, as the library grows, this does become even more accurate in that sense. And then the display options that we have are pretty awesome. So you can go from drapes to, by pinching in, you go to the roll, you pinch in again, and you go to our patent pending one-to-one. And what that does is it gives you a full screen view of the material that matches the scale of the real world swatch. What we do is some math magic, as Thomas likes to call it, that takes that into consideration. You don't have to put a ruler, a reference object, you don't have to zoom in and out. It literally shows you the actual scale of the material as if you cut the swatch in the shape of your phone. And then one of the other key highlights is our QR code system. So every single material or asset that gets uploaded to Swatchbook gets a unique QR code. That QR code can then be printed and attached to the physical sample. That means I can get all the metadata behind this material directly from that scan. That changes how suppliers are also sending these materials. Instead of sending, header with like 15 different 1-inch swatch cutouts, you send one large swatch that's great for touch and feel. I get a sense of what that looks like and feels like. But then the QR code gives me all the metadata of that material, including what other colors it comes in, whether those are real or digital, as well as the more important thing for us is it actually showcases that material on a physical product, which to us, that is kind of the aha moment where I can actually see what this looks like on a product as opposed to a flat swatch. Again, we're trying to minimize the amount of time it takes to make decisions, and this is certainly one of them. And ultimately, if you were sitting down with a bunch of these materials, there's no reason why you can't scan multiples of them and put these into a collection and then share that collection with your colleagues, with your supplier, and say, hey, out of the 50 you sent us, I'm looking at these 15 and here's the collection. And then I can send that collection to my design team and say, hey, here's the 15 for our seasonal palette. And again, we're just looking at what the user experiences are. How can we make this a better option for them? If you do use 2D or 3D applications such as Illustrator or Photoshop or Rhino or Modo or Clo, Marvelous Designer, all of those, you typically don't want to download these materials one at a time. You'd probably want to download them in one go, especially if you're a technical person. You don't want to have to organize these one by one. So we have a sync application. The sync application allows you to grab those same collections that we had talked about and download them based on your user preferences. So if I'm an Illustrator user, I do tech packs. I'll just set that in there, and it downloads from a collection the images that are relevant to me. If I'm using this for 3D, then I can say, hey, I want the scans. I want those so I can put them together. For certain applications, we do have full integrations, such as Romans CAD or Modo or Colorway, that automatically can suck up that data and put them directly within their systems. And when you grab these materials and you apply them to your models and you put them in your rendering engine of choice, these are the results that you would expect to get. Really high quality materials, very stunning results that span anywhere from footwear to apparel. And you can see how, this is something you can put on your site and sell before you even make the product itself. But it's really high quality materials. That's kind of what sets us apart from what's available, is that this material, I can go and buy it, but I can also put it in my 3D. I can sell it before I make it. I can iterate through it. It really depends on the workflow that you have internally. And we have a bunch of other stuff that we do that we won't have time to go through this webinar, but more than happy to see if we can address them via our questions. The next thing that we wanted to also cover is what's Swatchbook's offering for enterprise clients, because obviously a lot of you do come from enterprise and brands that are looking for more than just, hey, I just need a piece of software. I do need more help. I do need more partnerships in solving very complicated problems, to be a bit more exact. So this is kind of Swatchbook productivity acceleration for enterprise. And it kind of has the same challenges. When we talk to these different brands, it almost has very similar, at least, challenges. Having disconnected material libraries, the physical library is really isolated from the PLM, PDM, or DAM system that they're using. There's no real order there. Obviously, nothing is visual except for the physical library. The manual entry of materials, the user errors that happen in there, in the naming and those spellings. Having the brands to do it, it's kind of an overwhelming thing for multiple material departments. Color and material creation is still too technical. It's not scalable for everybody to be a part of that. Material development, management, and sharing is, again, slow. It's usually done through spreadsheets or PDF files. It's non-visual. It's disconnected from, again, the data centers that you have internally. Manual entry for early bill of materials for color material variants. That's also still, literally some of these brands type them in, which is shocking. Manual creation for render assets on sales rollouts or merchandising books, again, is very manual. A lot of times they're not utilizing these assets in there. Factories are still utilizing 2D tech packs. It's kind of fascinating where, a client actually brought it up to us, is even though they work in 3D, so initially they get the sketch in 2D, they go to 3D, and then they ultimately provide a 2D tech pack. And they're like, we don't understand why we're going back to 2D since we have everything in 3D. So we're trying, again, to resolve some of these challenges there. Sales, again, relying on static images. If you're selling to retailers, you're still relying on these images, sometimes printouts, and then having to lug around all the physical samples and all the different colorways. We feel that there's something much better out there. And obviously disconnection between PDM, PLM, and then suppliers. And that's something to us is a need to kind of convey as well, that there should be a better solution. And ultimately, what we're about with Swatchbook is at the forefront for us is having a single source of truth that starts at the supply chain, making sure that the suppliers are providing the information, and then that trickles down, whether you're going through PLM manufacturing and ultimately your product, or you're also going into either PDM or DAM systems, and then visualization, and then e-commerce. And obviously some companies are taking it further to gaming, media and entertainment, into your VR, XR experiences. I mean, it should be coming in from one source. We shouldn't have somebody at the agency making these materials and we get charged for it. Somebody else is making the physical samples and they got to go do all the different variations there. It should start at the supplier. It's cheaper and more efficient for everybody, including the supplier. I mean, and ultimately we now see, how important sustainability tracking and transparency in the supply chain, having this as a live link to the material means that I can go back to the supplier and say, hey, I need information about that material that spans, I want to know at the yarn level, how was this processed? Where did you get the material? Which country? They can enter all that data. And the moment they do, everybody in your organization that's utilizing that material and has a live link to it can trickle that information down to them as well. And that's how we see the future of these materials kind of happening. Again, we also work on workflow process mapping. We don't just go in there and say, hey, here's a license of materials, yep, and we're out. We realize that this is a larger conversation with a lot of departments. So many times we're looking at, what exactly is your process? We help them map it out. We help them understand where we reside, where we can help, where we can assist. We have a lot of lovely partners that we work with that can actually take on some of the burdens in those cycles and help them get digitized as quickly as possible. Ultimately for us, we start off obviously with the data prep for the materials coming in from the supplier. That's our starting point. It certainly isn't the end of it. That white line that you saw earlier is something that we take on and we continue, because this material you keep using over and over. And for us, what we try to do is we set up and manage material libraries inside of Swatchbook, both from a marketplace perspective as well as the private library. So private libraries means that a brand can actually have their isolated own sandbox of material development that is not visible by the suppliers. It's not visible, obviously, by any other brand, but they can still look at the marketplace itself for materials, and it can be at the user level. So you might have your senior designers, they can go out and check out the marketplace and find all these amazing materials. But then your, for example, junior material designers or junior designers, they have a set deadline on products. They have a set a collection to use, so they can be isolated to just use those. Again, it just depends on the organization and their setup. But the single source of truth, that's very key for us, is that to make sure that that information and that data is coming from the supplier directly, gives everybody a much clearer way of how to use and utilize things. Creation of digital material color ranges. We feel this is pretty important. A lot of times, a brand comes in and looks at the 50 shades of different colors that a supplier provides, and it's still not enough, and they still want to create their own. So we want to provide tools that do that without having to wait for those physical sample swatches to come in. And obviously save up material and color up variants inside of Swatchbook account. So as we said, we host not just the materials, but we host materials, 2D, 3D assets, whether it's your designs, your products, anything that you want in there. So a place to go and get back those different variants and see them is key. And then we do have an API that allows you to get bidirectional integration with either PDM or PLM or existing DAM or any kind of database backend system that can integrate with the programmatic backend. So with us, we use REST API, and that makes things a lot easier. We also help in data prep from CAD data to Swatchbook. So a lot of times when we're utilizing these, we're trying to make the files light enough for for somebody using it on a browser that we don't know what version it is. So we also help in that process as well as part of our service offerings. And then generation of virtual bill of materials, especially if you're using different collections within our system. And this is one thing that we did with the colorway team as well, to make sure that you get that information without having to manually type it. Whether we're automating that process through our API or building those collections or building those bill of materials directly for you, we can fill all that data. And this is just an example of one of our clients and what we were able to do with them. We onboarded over 80 plus suppliers of different materials, trim, and hardware. And we'll continue to expand that to their full set. That's just kind of their core material suppliers, where they still have another probably 100 or so to go, which is amazing. But we start off with the ones that they really rely on for the next season. But these are the types of things that we are helping in at the enterprise level. And for us, we call this a technology solution. Beyond the products and maintenance that we provide, we have the supplier onboarding, and we can't emphasize how important the supplier onboarding is if you really wanted this to succeed. And our team in China just does an amazing job of tracking each supplier, making sure they have conversations with them, showcase the technology to them, show them samples of how this is going to help them, educate them how to expand their business as well. So a lot of times with suppliers, you know, they might put the materials on there and they're like, okay, I'm done. And they expect everybody to just go in and find it. It's not as simple. We show them how to share these collections with their clients, how to offer them different capabilities, what type of information to fill in, how to engage with the clients and understand what digital can do for them as well, because some of the clients don't know 3D or digital at all. So again, kudos to our China team. They've just been phenomenal at this, and they communicate directly with the brands, Asia teams or material sourcing teams to kind of give them an update where things are, if there's any challenges there, to make sure everybody's on the same conversation. We've also had roadmap acceleration requirements where, hey, I love your tool. Can you just make this? And you know, we don't want to always do custom development, but if it fits within something that we were going to do, we can offer accelerating that specific feature to their needs. Obviously, API system implementations, and we help them out in that, either finding vendors or making sure our API is robust enough or is able to cater to what their needs are. We do also offer custom development. We try to minimize that to your core needs. And obviously we look at the engagement level, but sometimes it's needed. Sometimes somebody is trying to solve something very unique and they can't find a solution to it. The digitization services are open to both brands and suppliers. We've made it very affordable. The prices are all listed on our website. Again, we believe this is the best service center in the world, because it caters not to just the quality, but the different technologies that are needed, all the way from the fabric analysis to the scanning, to the videos, to the metadata, to how we showcase it inside a swatchbook. It's a one unique user experience that's unparalleled right now. Automation development. This is where you would basically look at things in terms of, I want to grab my assets and automate the process of prepping them. Whether it's consultation services, just to understand, you know, how do you make your process better? How do you become more efficient? What other technologies can I utilize? We do link our clients to other technology partners that have amazing solutions that we don't offer. Dedicated support, obviously, and finally, just training, making sure people are trained up to understand. And our training, we prefer that it starts small. Let's get some, you know, quick wins in there, have people understand what they need to do and use, and then we move on to getting everybody onboarded step by step. That's kind of our enterprise offering. We do want to give you kind of some background on who Swatchbook is. These are the three founders. So Thomas Stigger is on the call. You know, Thomas comes from a decades of experience in digital product visualization and product strategy and management. And he's been crucial in this. He's worked at multiple companies before, including Luxion and PTC and Siemens in that digitalization space, and worked with huge companies like Apple, Bose, and Nike to make sure that they're able to get their visualization done. And he's been a crucial part of getting that strategy for our product and launched. Cinerate, who comes from a totally different world with pharmaceuticals and management and operations, over 15 years in that space, but she brings that again to the Swatchbook side and really focuses on the business sides of things. And then my background is in 3D. I started 3D production and I moved over to where Thomas is at, which is the design of software. I worked for Foundry before on visualization tools. And I worked for companies, again, similar to what Thomas's look like Nike, Oakley, Tesla, and others, finding ways to better their visualization elements. Our team is 20 plus globally. We probably have a single person in every single time zone in the world that would probably meet what you need. But it spans everywhere. And we believe in people, we believe in people's abilities to do their job from wherever they are. And as long as they're happy, we're happy. And they have been phenomenal. And these are all engineers, developers, designers that we've worked in the past. And we kind of chose the best ones that we have. And they've joined Swatchbook and believe in the vision that we have in there. And obviously started in 2017. And then we have a number of resellers across the board as well. And our suppliers, this is the suppliers at the end of 2019, but we're so excited because just within the next month or so, it's going to be over 120 suppliers. And again, all these suppliers are coming from the brand level. So they've been vetted to some degree. Maybe they're not your approved vendor as a brand, but they certainly come from other brands that have gone through some vetting process. So it gives everybody more confidence that this is really the enterprise solution that they're looking for. We also have an amazing ecosystem of partners that we work with in terms of products, and we're more than happy to put you in touch with any of them if it makes sense to you, to make sure that you're successful in what you're trying to do on the digitization. This Spotlight series, as we mentioned before, is really a starting point for us to educate, to expand, to explore the possibilities of what we have, not just as a technology company or a technology solution company, but really talk about our suppliers. And so the next Spotlight series, we're going to focus on one of our suppliers, Boyi. They make high performance fabrics. They'll be introducing some of their materials, and we anticipate multiple suppliers after that as well. Will have their own kind of little showcase where they talk about the materials they have on offering, what they look like. We get to see them. Maybe it's a bit more, towards sourcing and design, where people can actually go see these materials on a live session and answer questions, and then go back and explore it on Swatchbook as well, and then continue the conversation with that supplier if you find something that's interesting. And that's basically it. If there's any questions, I'm not sure if I haven't been paying attention, but if there's any questions that you need answered, let us know. We still have a couple, at least 13 minutes until this is done, but if we finish earlier, great. Everybody can go back and have a good day. Or if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them now, or even through email as well. Our email is team@swatchbook.us, which is listed on all the slides. Again, we'll share a recording of this after it's done. I don't see any questions popping in.
I had a couple of questions earlier, but nothing else yet. There was a question about testing, if that's okay. And in this particular case, it wasn't so much about the Clo fabric kit and the browseware kit, but rather than like actual material testing through like testing labs,
SGS and others. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So we do support the reports to be in there. We have had some clients asking about integration between them, but if you do have a specific one that you need to work with and you need that integration, again, I'm more than happy to work with you on it. But yeah, that's basically it. But
maybe to add also to this, we do already support this as part of the material. You can attach that test report if you have it, if you have conducted it on materials yourself into your own material library. But also, if this is of importance to you, you can also ask your supplier to actually work with you on that. So they actually provide that to any material that they upload and share with you. Yep.
Okay. Well, I don't see any additional questions. That's it for us. Have a great one. Email us if you need to later on. And then we look forward to the next session, which should be coming in the next week or two with more suppliers and their materials. We do anticipate more series like this where we dig in a bit further inside of Swatchbook and do maybe more reveals. If you do have a request of, hey, can you go over how do you do this or how do you do that, or what type of software options do we have for, modeling or simulation, let us know. We can even bring different partners on board so you guys can hear from them directly, and we'll go from there. Thank you so much for your day and your time. Have a good one. Stay safe, and we will talk to you next time.